enjoying life more with autism?
So the title has autism in it, and that's because I have a 35-year-old son who's on the autism spectrum, and I also have a soon-to-be 59-year-old brother who has autism. So I have been living with autism for pretty much my entire life, and it's been a wild ride. That's the best I could say. There's been a lot of ups and a lot of downs and a lot of joys and a lot of upsets, and just all the feelings that we have as human beings have been my experience of living with somebody who has autism. And I guess the reason I'm here is because a few years ago now, I think back to 2014, I ran across what you've been exploring in this series, called the three principles. And I know listeners are not going to know what that is, but really I ran across this amazing understanding of human beings that I didn't know about before. Now, I consider myself someone who has thrived rather than survived. And it also felt like it was a lot of work to thrive, because I was just efforting at accepting and not judging. And I was just putting a lot of effort into, because I wanted to live a happy life. And I have had a happy life, and I knew that happiness came from within you and not necessarily from your circumstances. I understood that. But I thought, given that it came from within me, that I was in charge of working really hard to stay happy, to be happy. That was my goal. And I was told the happier I was, the better I was going to be for my son. So that was an extra layer of pressure for me to feel good and to be happy and to be accepting. So then getting to 2014, when I was finishing up some life coach training, that's one of the things I do. I consider myself a life coach. I ran into this understanding of the human experience that we're talking about. I ran into understanding the power of thought, the energy that moves through us and creates our experience. And what was a big aha for me was that I wasn't in charge of that thought. It's kind of like, what? Because that's what I've been working on for a long time, positive thinking and all of that. So I learned my thoughts are creating my experience. Okay, that's great. That makes sense. But I'm not in charge of what comes through my head. So that was a big aha for me. But it was also a relief, because I'd been working hard, not only working hard to care for my son and to teach my son, but working hard on my own internal self, to think a certain way. And when I realized that I wasn't really in control of how I was thinking, um, which some people might say, wait a minute, wait, that can't be right. But if you really kind of test it out for yourself, like, think about it. Can you actually control what's flowing through your head? And if you could, wouldn't you make it different? So you can't. So that was a relief to me, because it just allowed me to be a human being and be who I was, and sometimes feel bad and sometimes feel discouraged. And yes, those thoughts were coming inside out, but it was okay. And that's been you know, I don't know, a learning curve for me. I keep seeing it at new levels. But that was one of the big things that really made a difference for me, was really starting to understand that. And the other thing that happened with me about, 2014, so it's been almost 5 years, I guess, is this idea that beneath all the ups and downs and all the emotions, and beneath the autism, if we want to go to the person who has autism or the parent, beneath all those layers that we have this well-being. And I'm still grasping that, honestly. But when I started to see a little piece of that, and I remember the time that that happened, my son, who has autism, but also has a lot of other things that go along with his autism that he struggles with. And one of them is sort of, he hasn't had any for a couple years, but he would go through these cycles where he would be very upset and very agitated and anxious and couldn't leave the house and couldn't eat. It was sort of a whole package that would happen with him every 2 weeks on the clock. And I was talking with somebody about these principles of human beings at that time. And I saw that, like, I at first couldn't see how he could be okay when he was in that state. But something sort of clicked for me. And I think it was when I could see that actually he was doing things to take care of himself when he was in that state. And how did he know to do those things? It's his wisdom and his okay piece deep inside. Um, and to look at him, he's pretty severely involved. So somebody might look at him and say, how could he possibly have any wisdom and how could he possibly know? But it was during this period for him where he was struggling with this agitation that he was doing a whole bunch of little things that were just what he needed to do. And I'll give you an example of that. So one of the things that happens when he's in this state is he's so agitated, he's hitting his head with his hand. And so we have helmets to protect his head from getting huge. And so he wears a rafting helmet when he's in one of these cycles. And I mean, he'll wear it. He'll have to wear it for about 2 weeks, literally. But every once in a while, I think, well, maybe we could take it off. And when you go to take it off, when he's in one of those, now he's not verbal, so he doesn't have words to tell me, but he takes my hand and stops me from taking that helmet off. How does he know to do that? He just does. It's his wisdom. It's that piece inside him that despite all the crazy waves that are going on that he's going through, that piece inside him, that wisdom piece, is kind of intact. And I don't know if that's making sense, but I started to just see that a little bit. And I thought, there's something I need to understand more here. And that was my introduction to this understanding.
I'm interested that you said that he hasn't had any of these cycles just recently. And I'm wondering if anything else has changed in him since you've had this understanding or since you've been around the understanding.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say because the part about these cycles is that they do go away sometimes for a few years. And it's also because we're always trying something. Might be medication, which we haven't had any luck with, but it's usually something alternative. So we did implement some alternative things for him. And that seemed like it was the turning point, but I don't really know, you know? So I'm not really sure. It's
okay. So I'm also interested in how do you know which alternative treatments to try? Where does that come from?
yeah, that that is totally the wisdom piece that we're talking to, the connection to something almost outside of us, but also inside of us. That sort of tells us turn left, turn right, go here, look at this, don't go there. And that's been another gift for me because there's so many, and I write about this in my book, there's so many choices that we're faced with. I mean, all of us as humans, but the parent of a person with autism and even the person with autism is faced with a lot of decisions and choices to make. And now that we have the internet, which we didn't have when my son was little in the 80s, it's multiplied by a gazillion, and everybody's saying, no, look over here. I have it. I have the answer, and people have the cure, and, this and that. So I have really learned, and I like that it validated for me that I was kind of on the right track, to trust my intuition and my gut or my knowing as to what looks like a good idea to go for. And when is it not a good idea to do that? Even though people are going to say, no, this is what you should do. It's, it's just something that bubbles forth in you that knows. And it's hard to put words onto, but you just know. You just know, like, try this. And there aren't any, for sure answers to anything. We're not in control of anything,
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting that you're talking about knowing that, and that's the difference, isn't it, between knowing and trying to work it out and thinking about it and trying to work it out logically, and, as you say, doing what you think you should do or what other people tell you to do. There's a lot of difference when you follow just what your heart or your gut or your intuition tells you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. That's huge. It really is huge. Because then it doesn't have to be a struggle. And I know that I've struggled before, and not to say I won't struggle again, but it's much more of a flow for me on knowing what's next than knowing what's not next. Yeah.
And I imagine it must make a big difference to your son too, with the accepting, with the knowing, rather than thinking I've got to change things and I've got to fix him and I've got to be perfect myself. I've got to be positive all the time. And
Yes.
just that must be making a big difference to him.
Yes. I'm sure that it is. I'm sure that it is. And it's been such a journey for me, because when he was little, honestly, I was trying to fix him. Because that just seemed like a given. And there were things that I was told, if you do this just perfectly, you have a good chance of getting that fix or getting to that fix or whatever. And so it's been a road with that. But my motto is really help him be the best he can be. And that's kind of what we all want for all of us. And sometimes whatever's we feel doesn't feel like our best, but that's the best in the moment. Like when he struggles in those cycles, that's the best he can do in that moment. And I I aim to be kind to myself too. So when I struggle, that's the best that I can be. Um, but for him not to have to be a different way for me to feel happy, that's really big. Yeah.
There's a lot of pressure off both of you.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of pressure off both of you. And when you said you were teaching him, did you mean that you were teaching him about this understanding, or you were teaching him? You said something about teaching him before, but I think that was to do with the teaching him to be positive. Earlier on, you mentioned.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure. It's more I don't think, yeah, I haven't really tried to teach him any of those kinds of things. So I figure he'll get it from me, how I am. But teaching him is usually teaching him more like skills that he needs, like, to use his napkin at the table and more things like that.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. I thought I'd just get that clear for people, that it wasn't about
Yeah.
teach him to understand this the way that you do.
Oh, no. But I know, when my state of mind is in a more settled place, he feels that absolutely. And I think he picks up everything, even though it doesn't look like he does on his outside package, I know that he does. Yeah.
How was it when you were a child? How much was your brother older than you or younger than you?
My brother's a little younger than me, but so this was the 60s, and my parents were told to institutionalize him. So he didn't live at home from about the time I was maybe 5 or 6. He was in an institution that, and we did go and visit him, but I didn't really understand, in the 60s, you just didn't talk about that kind of stuff. It was sort of a hidden, like an embarrassment. And kids like my brother didn't go to school like they do now. So yeah, my parents did the best they could, but it was a really long time before I understood what was going on because they just didn't talk about it.
So when did you find out what was going on with it?
I'm not really sure, but by the time I got to college, my freshman year, I did a paper on autism because I was curious about it. And so it must have been somewhere. I don't really know. I don't know. And then I ended up getting a degree in special education. And before I had my children, I was a special ed teacher.
So what difference do you think this understanding makes to special education, for example?
It could. It could. I think it could really have a huge impact on just the way teachers see their role with their students, for one. And, I think understanding is so huge. And if we understand that, and I know this has been talked about on some of the other videos, but I'll say it again. The idea of separate realities, the idea that we're all looking through a different pair of glasses is big. So, that helps us understand the other person a bit better to know why they're coming at something from in a totally different way. And now with autism, I want to say separate realities magnified, because the person with autism, not only are they a human and they have a different pair of glasses on, the processor in their brain works differently than the typical processor. So the information that they're getting from the outside world often is just not being processed the way we process. It's a little more piecey. So we process more in a package. So we hear and we see, and I can look at you and I can connect with you in this way, and I can listen to you and I can respond. It's a package. Whereas the person with autism, a lot of times it doesn't come in as a package. So if they're listening to you, it might be really difficult for them to look at you. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It might be difficult for them to look at you, and to really, really understand that it's not that they don't want to look at you. It's just they can't connect in that way with you, by looking and listening. And I've heard that from people with autism that can express that. So I think the more teachers can understand those separate realities, we don't have to force the child with autism to look at us to connect. They don't have to look at us to learn. And that's just a small example, but I think the impact of really understanding that can be huge for educators.
Yes, and I'm thinking it in the same way it was a relief for you when you understood. I'm sure it is a relief for the teachers that do understand and teachers who could understand. It must make a big difference. How do you see this having an impact on your son's life now and from now on?
I don't know exactly how to answer that. I know that it's powerful. I just know that it's powerful and almost a little magical. And what I hope is that, because I'm less worried and fearful about the future than I used to be. Really understanding that I don't control. And right now I'm sort of putting some things together. He's actually going to be moving into his own home next year in a special community. And I know that I can't micromanage the future from where I sit. And I just think for him, that makes for a less frazzled, stressed mother who knows, like, I can take a step and a step and a step, but I can't go off 100 steps. And I know that what we have set up initially is going to evolve and change for him, but I can't know what all of that is. And I used to really try hard to figure that out. I wanted to have all the bases covered. And it's not to say that I shouldn't plan, or it doesn't mean that, but it means that I don't have to figure everything out, and everything is not gonna, even if I thought I had it figured out, it wouldn't be. It doesn't work that way. We really can't figure the future in our heads and on paper, all the details and the nuances. So I can only think that's a benefit for him. And I try to influence the other people in his life as well, when they're off in the future, or when they're running back to the past and shoulda, coulda, woulda-ing. I just try to kind of redirect, let's keep walking forward. So I don't know if that answers that question, but yeah.
Yes, that's what I was, yeah. So some of the people, I know you said it was mentioned in another video, but a lot of people watching this won't have seen the other videos. So maybe you could speak a bit more about separate realities, because I think that's really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is really important. Well, given that our experience is created through thought. So each one of us has thought running through us, just that energy is constantly, and our personal thinking is part of that energy. And sometimes we latch on to certain ones and then they become like a big snowball, picking up speed as they go down the hill. And pretty soon, one anxious thought leads to the next anxious thought, the next, and we feel anxious. So it's our thought that's creating our anxiety. And I could feel anxious about my son's future because I don't know. And I could have a lot of anxious thinking, and then I feel that. So the separate realities comes in that what your thoughts are completely different than mine, completely different. And my husband, who's also a parent to my son, and this is so good to see, his thoughts are completely different as well. And his experience of my son is different. And a lot of times there's difficulties between parents of kids with autism for that reason. So he's got basically his thought colored glasses are what he's wearing, and I'm wearing my thought colored glasses. So we see my son, but we kind of don't see the same sun, see the same sun, because we're looking through our thoughts. Our thoughts are those glasses. And, there have been times where we see things really differently. But there's kind of that expectation of, oh, well, he should see it like I see it. And we forget that no, he can't see it like I see it, because his thought process is not mine. So that's the separate reality. And we're all wearing these thought glasses. We're all having our realities created. That's why we all see things differently. But we forget, or we don't know, or we're not aware. And that's where so much conflict comes in. And that's where conflict comes in between parents. So I mean, knowing, and I forget too. I forget, but knowing that we're all wearing these thought glasses and we can't see things exactly the same as each other. We just can't. It's such a big thing to know. Imagine if everybody in the whole world knew that. There would be so much less conflict. um, so it comes back to that understanding.
And the other part of the understanding, maybe you could talk a bit more about as well, about how can he possibly be, or how can anyone with autism possibly be okay? I know you said you're still getting your head around that yourself to some extent, but
Yeah.
how do you understand that a bit more? Because seeing that if everybody could see that everybody else is okay and that their behavior is just a result of whatever thoughts they happen to be experiencing at the time, that may seem fine until you think, well, how does that work with people who seem to have problems? How does that work if someone is behaving in a way that we don't understand?
It's a little hard to put in words, and maybe that's been the hang up for me. But every time I get a little glimpse of it, so the way that I see it is almost like, and I have a grandson now, so I can kind of see him. Babies are born and they're this amazing soul that has been put together, not by us, not by the mother. I mean, literally, the seed is planted and then the baby's kind of on autopilot and is born and has, I think why we're attracted to babies is there's a spark in there, a spark or a jewel or whatever you want to call it. And the way that I see it is that doesn't ever leave. That doesn't leave. That's something that we always kind of have way, way, way in there. And the person with autism is no different. They have that too. And they have some different layers, one being the autism, that are sort of over that. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it's so. I'll just step back and say my son's had a lot of people that have worked with him in his life, and a lot of people tend to really fall in love with him. They do, and there's something special with him, even though has so many needs and he needs so much help with everything, and he can be really loud out in the community and all of those things that are his top layer. There's something that people connect with, and it's not even something you can put your hands around, kind of, because it's underneath all of that. It's that little jewel or that spark. And part of how I know it's there kind of is, I'll just share another little quick story. So a couple of years ago, almost, he was in a serious accident, and he's okay now. He made an amazing recovery, but the first night was in intensive care because he had all these broken bones, and he was laying there. We were kind of waiting to see what was going to happen with him, but he was awake, and he went into this unbelievably peaceful state. Now, you're not supposed to do that when you have 12 broken bones, right? And you're in pain, and you're in a scary hospital, and all these people are touching you and doing things to you and all of that. But in and out of some struggling, at times he was really peaceful. And medical people would come in the room and they would say things like, "It feels kind of zen in here." Now, what's that about? What is that about? And I think, and by all rights, he should have been should have been freaking out, screaming, whatever, I should have been freaking out, all of that. Not to say that I wasn't worried and fearful and all of those things, but there were moments of peace in there. And there were moments of peace in him, and you could feel that energy in the room. So to me, that's what we're talking about here. That's that little spark or that jewel that's inside. That's okay. Beneath autism, broken bones. I mean, there are a lot of layers there. Yeah, it's tricky to articulate and to know. It's just another thing that we can know and we can see. And yes, people with autism have a lot of challenges in this world. And people like my son who need a lot of care, but then there are other people that maybe are going to be listening to this who themselves have autism, and they have challenges. Working is a challenge for them. Getting a job is a challenge. Having a relationship is a challenge. But what if beneath those challenges, there is still that spark and that piece that's a human being, and that's okay? I guess that's the best way I can describe it. So I don't know.
Yes, and in that situation, it certainly is important for people to know that we all have that that whatever is going on the surface, as you say, is not who we are. That's not who we are. Who we are is that spark. And it just reminded me, when you were saying that, of the conversation that I had yesterday with Gillian Fox about death and dying, because not that we're talking about death and dying, but when it comes to that point, when somebody dies, you feel that you feel that essence, that spark, that whatever you call it, move out of the body somehow. It's just like, and I don't want to say it disappears or it goes somewhere, but if you've experienced that, I've been around people dying a lot, and all the doctors and nurses are aware of, or that I've spoken to are aware of, that spirit, if that's what you want to call it, leaving, moving, coming out of the body, not being in the body anymore. The body is not the person.
Yeah.
And that is the nearest thing that, as you say, it's impossible to describe in words, but that's the nearest thing that it sounds like to me. What you're describing is we are the spirit inside, or not inside, but beyond the body, not just the human body that's having this human experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good example of it. Yeah, it's kind of an energy. And people with autism have been told so much that they have the impression that they kind of need to fix themselves or get fixed. And they don't know that there's something in there that doesn't need to be fixed.
Or maybe at some level they do. Sometimes I think when you say, like, that piece that you experienced, I think sometimes they know better than us.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, it's hard.
But at the same time, there's the impression from the rest of society that you need to be like this and you need to be like that. No, you don't. Who says so? Who says that's just another thought? Just people listening to thoughts that are saying we should all be this way. And that's enough pressure on the rest of us. Never mind.
Yes.
Never mind if you've got a special way of seeing the world, which is what it is, really. Autism is a special way of experiencing the world. So my way of seeing the human experience is that that the human body is like a virtual reality headset that the spirit puts on and has an experience.
Mm-hmm.
And they just have, from what I can see, is that they just have a differently programmed headset.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
So why would they have the same experience of the world, and why would they do the same things? Or that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. It doesn't mean that there's a problem. It just means that they're having a different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's us that maybe has the problem in trying to make them conform and fit in with how we think should be. Mm.
Yeah. And, I think there's kind of a fine line between the idea of making them conform and fit, and teaching and helping a person to kind of get along in our world. It's a fine line. And I don't know if you want an example or not, but I kind of mentioned that my son, Kyle is his name, he's not verbal, but he makes a lot of sounds, and he tends to get really noisy and loud at times, like especially say if he's happy and excited, or even if he's stressed, loud sounds will come out from him. And I had one of the gals that works with him, wonderful lady, and she kind of always felt when she took him out in the community, say to a store or whatever, people don't like that too bad, which is one way to think. But what began to happen is that it was limiting him from being in situations. So we had been asked a couple times to leave a movie theater. People don't understand. And, we've had situations where he couldn't participate, and he would have enjoyed those things. So somebody that we were working with, sort of a coach, suggested to work with him on keeping his voice down in certain situations. And I think all of us kind of looked at each other and thought, there's no way he could possibly do that. He can't control that, That was our process. But we're like, okay, we'll try. And sure enough, it turns out that he is able to turn his voice down. And we kind of developed a way of, talking to him and showing him. And it's not perfect. And sometimes he turns it down and then it goes right back up again. But he was able to sort of be more than what we thought he could be. And so on the one hand, is that trying to fix him necessarily? Not really, but it's trying to open up his world so that he can have more outside experiences. So I think if somebody hears, oh, don't need to fix my child, it doesn't mean sit back and do nothing, and don't try to help them be the best they can be, and don't challenge them. Now, it might have been that Kyle couldn't have controlled his voice, and we would have found that out. But we found out really quickly that he actually could. Who knew? Who knew that was possible? So that's that fine line of, and it's the same for the person with autism, is if they understand that there's some things that they can possibly do to have more access to things that they don't currently have access to. Maybe it's a job. Then, that can open up a world for them that they didn't have. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yes, it does. And if they know about wisdom and following wisdom in the way that you were talking about, and following your intuition and so on, rather than doing things that they think they should do, that makes a big difference too, I would think.
yes, it does. And even in that example that I gave you, my wisdom told me, give it a go. I know you think that he can't do it, but what do you have to lose by checking that out? So that was my wisdom, because I could have said, we're not doing it. If people don't like his noise, too bad. That could, but we decided to give it a shot. And then that took us off on a whole different path. Yeah.
And I'm interested that what made you become a coach in the first place?
Well, and this is another place that wisdom comes in. So I wrote 2 previous books about living with autism, and I was out kind of marketing those and doing events and things like that. And I just got to a point where I didn't want to do that anymore. It was kind of sudden. And I was looking for what's next for me. Now I still have Kyle home and I still participate in his care, but there's room for something else. And I was looking and I thought I wanted to teach yoga, but the training program was full. And I was literally just sort of like, what's next? And somehow coaching came into my, sphere. A friend, I think, mentioned to me, her friend had just completed a program. And I just walked in that direction literally. And I thought, I've kind of been doing that with people in a way, the people that came to my home to work with my son. And so I just found myself signing up for this very involved life coach training program that took me a little over a year to complete. And it was right at the end of it that I ran into the principles, and not because they talked about it in the coach program. It was just from listening to something that someone sent me that led me to this, that led me to that. And pretty soon I was listening to Michael Neal, and that's what happened. Yeah, but it was totally, it was so wisdom and intuition guided. Don't really know why I did everything. It just looked like that's what I should do. And and down to the email that I got from a friend, the very first breadcrumb that led me to this understanding, it was usually an email I would delete. But for some reason I didn't.
Yeah, that's how it works. So the reason I was asking that was because I was interested in how whatever challenges we have in life, whether it's having a child with autism or a brother with autism or whatever it is in life, how that's all part of the of the experience that we're having. And it's not wrong or bad, or it shouldn't be this way. It's like, what an opportunity. If you can see it as an opportunity, and that you can enjoy whatever you have in life, which is what we're talking about, enjoying life with
Yeah.
around autism. It's like, yeah, rather than seeing it as, oh, this is a problem and this shouldn't have happened to me, and it's and the victim side of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we do go down that path, as parents, and it's kind of promoted. I feel like it's, yeah, it's touted and promoted in a lot of ways. But I know for me, honestly, if I was ordering ahead of time the child I was going to have, would I have ordered autism as part of the package? I don't think I would have, probably not. But given I'm not in charge of that, not in charge. Given that I had a son with autism, it changed my whole world. It was an opportunity. It was. It is. It's still, and it still is, because I'm a completely different person, I feel, with different glasses on, you know, and it's taken me off on paths that I don't know that I would be on if not for that. Like, it completely turned my direction of life into seeing new things, including this understanding. And I write about this, I think, in one of my books, really making me a better parent to my other children that came along later, a different parent than I would have been. And, you can't go back and rewind and take yourself in another direction. You're in the direction that you're in. And it's okay to say something that has been extremely challenging has been probably the biggest opportunity of my entire life.
your last book is since you've come across this understanding. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So if people want to read about autism and your experience of it and your experience with the understanding in more depth, they can read your book. And there are links to that on our website at thesecretofeverything.com.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And that will be below the video in any case. Do you work individually with people now?
I do work with people individually all over the world. And I don't only work with parents, but I do work with parents, and I have worked with parents, and those are the people that are really close to my heart, that I have a pretty deep connection with. Honestly, I haven't worked with any people themselves with autism. I'd be up for it, but that hasn't been what's come to me. So yes, so I do that. And yes, about my book, where people can read more, and it's also an audio book, and the narration is exquisite. So yeah.
Excellent. That's really helpful, because a lot of people prefer to listen to audiobooks. That's true. So I haven't seen that there are any questions. If anyone wants to ask any questions, you can type into the chat box, or you can put your hand up and you can come on if you'd like to. If not, doesn't look like we're getting any questions at the moment. So is there anything else that you think that we haven't covered, or that you'd like to add, or that's coming to you at this moment?
One of my favorite things to think about when I think about that spark within that we all have is resilience. Because I think part of that well-being that we all have, resilience is a big part of that. And I used to kind of consider it more, resilience means you bounce back to how you were before. But now I really understand there isn't ever any going back in any way. We can only go down the stream. We can't really go up the stream. We might try, but it's really hard to paddle when the current is going this way. So, but I like the idea of resilience, in that it's something that we all have, that we don't have to work on being more resilient. So after you have a child with autism, you don't have to work on your resilience, because it's built in you, and you're going to kind of uncover it as you go. And at some point, and maybe it's even in the beginning, you get a little piece of knowing that you're okay. You have this child with autism, and you're still okay. Is life exactly how it was before? No, but it's never gonna be, no matter what child you get. So I really like knowing about and understanding resilience. It's such a beautiful feature of the human design. And I look at my son, and he was very lucky in a lot of ways given that accident, but his resilience is just, what we've seen of it has just been incredible in every way, including the fact that there are quite a few things about him that are better since the accident. What? I know, I know it could have gone a different way or whatever, but it went how it went, and somehow he managed to pop up to the surface in a different way. And that's his resilience, and our resilience. And after all the turmoil and being kind of thrown around by life a bit with that accident, and when he came home, we experienced our resilience as well. So I think it's just important to really understand that, and for people to see that in themselves and in their lives and where they've experienced it. Yeah.
Yes, that's an interesting point that you mentioned about parents thinking that what I understood was that the parents can think that they've failed in some way in having having a child with autism? Is that what you meant?
I mean, I think they used to in the 60s because they actually blamed parents for autism. There was a whole school, just incredible school of thought that said it was the mother's fault. But more what I meant was, I lost my train of thought a bit. I think like at first, when you're first discovering your child has autism or you're concerned about it, you don't feel like you're ever going to be okay again because you're not feeling okay. And it feels like you're going to be this way forever. And to know of our resilience and understanding how our experience is such a flow that from moment to moment, you're going to have a different experience. And there's going to come a time, even if it's like a little sliver, that you actually feel okay. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that's helped people who have been who are struggling with that experience to see that there is a different way of experiencing.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it hasn't altogether made sense yet, they can listen back again and also listen to your audiobook. That would be a good one too. And also there are lots of others, as you said, lots of other videos in this series too that would help, even if they're not specifically about autism too. So thank you so much, Gayle. That's been really lovely, really lovely. Yeah. So if anyone has any questions or any comments that they'd like Gayle to answer, then please leave those underneath the video and I will make sure that Gayle sees them and gets back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, thank you so much. This was fun.
Yes, it was. Thanks very much for being here, Gayle. Thank you everyone for watching and we'll see you again soon. So thanks. Bye.